Hello everyone, my name is Faye Menifee and I am about to give a demonstration of how I do winter sowing of wild plants. A year ago I was in this position with these pots in front of me for the first time, and I seeded 17 milk jugs with seeds and put them out. And I was able to harvest 14 potfuls of plants. So I considered, since I didn't know a thing about what I was doing, that was a huge success. And so I'm going to show you exactly what I did last year to create that. I want to say that I got a lot of help and information from a group which I'm now a member of called Pollinator Paradise YXE, and it's on the internet under that name. It's a subgroup under a group called Wild About Saskatoon, and both of them are in the business of promoting the use of wildflowers and plants and grasses to rejuvenate our landscape. So, how I start wildflowers and grasses. First of all, you're going to need some soil, and it's really not fussy. The cheapest kind of soil you can find would do, because it's just going to hold the seeds over winter, and when they germinate, you're going to either move them to the garden or to other pots so that they can grow a little more. So you have your soil, something to mix it in. You need water and some kind of a means of delivering the water to the jugs with a spout. You need duct tape to hold the thing together, scissors and a knife, and some means of drilling holes in the bottom of the container. Now this one already has the holes in it, and there are about 8, I think. They were made with a tiny glue gun, and I have it here. So this is what my glue gun looks like. And I just take the glue stick out of it, so it's just a means of making a hot probe to push through the bottom of the container. And you need those holes to be at a decent size, like about the size, well, the size of this point thing up right to the rim, or the size of a pencil, so that it has good drainage. And you need jiffies to write on things with, and of course you need your seeds. So this one is I've got 3 ready to go. This one has not been cut yet, but the holes are made in it. So I'm going to cut the top off of it, except for the handle will stay attached, so it will have an attached lid. I'm just making a mark because I often go astray on this. And I'm going to make a start with a knife. I think I could actually do it all with a knife. At any rate, this is quite easy to cut. I just have little craft scissors here. And I go all the way around, all 4 sides, except for the bit underneath the handle, which is where the top hinges. And then I have my soil ready, And the trick about the soil is it needs to be really, really wet. And the demo I watched when I was learning said it shouldn't be so wet that when you squeeze it, water runs out, but close. So when I squeeze this soil, I have got it really wet. When I squeeze it, I can hear the squish of the water. And I think that's just about right. So I'm going to fill this up to about an inch below the cut. And how deep you've cut it is really not that significant, because there's lots of depth here for plants to root into. Okay, so now we have a container ready, and I actually have 4 containers, and I have got ready 4 packets of seeds. And so each seed, if you get it from a seed place, will have instructions for planting on it. And it's important that you look at those. This one is a packet of Gaillardia, and it came from Prairie Originals in Selkirk, Manitoba. So it says it's a perennial wildflower, blooms in July, likes to live in the sun. And we don't need to know any of that right now, but we will later. It's a good plant for butterflies, and it likes dry to medium soil the best. So for direct seeding outdoors, you could just put some seeds out in the fall. For seeding indoors, it says do not cover the seed, and germinates in 6 to 12 days. So that's the only instruction that we need to follow. In planting here, these seeds don't get covered. So I'm just going to get them out. And how many you plant is entirely up to you. If you want them to grow to a decent size for transplanting in the milk jug without moving them, then you're only going to plant, say, maybe 6 seeds. And I like to plant them thick, and then I transplant them. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to sprinkle them around on top. And you have to expect that not all of them will germinate. So put a generous amount in. I'll show you in a second what I decided to do with these. And I have no means of knowing how many of them will germinate, but since it's from a reliable company, I think they have a good chance of being quite a few. Okay, so that's the Gaillardia done. And I don't know, I hope you can see how many there are in there. And it said don't cover, so I'm just going to press them lightly onto the dirt. And that's planted. And one thing I learned that was a very good thing to do is we're going to label the outside. So when you're outside with the lid taped on, you can see what you've got in there. But for some reason, names fall off of things, and it's a good safeguard to have a little, I use a popsicle stick, put its name in there, and then it is ready to be taped up. So we'll just do the 4 seedings that I have ready to go. This one is a smooth aster, and it wants the seed to be covered 3 to 6 millimeters or 1/4 inch at most. It's a purple daisy-like flower, It blooms August to September. It's a great plant for butterflies. Its companion plant is goldenrod, and it can be seeded early in the spring or early in June or late in the fall. And it just says to sow 3 to 6 millimeters deep, and it germinates in 5 to 7 days. So, okay, so we're going to put 1/4 of an inch of dirt on top of this seed in here. And these are tiny, tiny, tiny. I think that's the end of the packet. That's as close as I can get to show you. And I'm just going to sprinkle them around. The thing I love about this method is, other than this little mess on my dining room table at the moment, which isn't bad, it's outside for the rest of the time. I transplant them outside. They sit outside all winter. They grow outside. And here goes 1/4 of an inch of extra soil on top of those ones. Take the lumps out of it, and there's a rock. A little bit more. Okay, that one gets its sign, smooth aster, and it's ready to tape up. The next thing I'm going to put in this pot is white prairie clover. And these last 2 seeds have come from a company near Saskatoon called Blazing Star Seed Company, and they're at Aberdeen. Okay, so we're going to read about this. And it says to scarify the seeds. So scarify means that the seeds have a hard coat on the outside of them, and unless the coat is broken in some way, they won't be able to germinate. That's if you're planting them indoors. And so we're not going to do this because they're going to go through the whole process of being seeded outside, but in these tubs. So anyways, to plant these indoors, you would need to soak them in 80° centigrade water for 24 hours and then chill them in the fridge for a day. So we don't have to do that. And it says to plant them 5 to 10 millimeters deep. So that's not very much. We'll just put a little dusting of soil over top of them. Seems like I'm at the end of all my packets here. So we sprinkle some of these around. And it's not like you throw them in the snowbank and forget about them, but really is a relaxed way of growing plants. After I've had the experience of growing them inside all over my living room, garden plants, that was. It's lovely to just put them outside and forget about them. If I put them outside on whatever date it is today, I circle that date on my calendar every month from now till spring, and that's the day that I water them. Okay, white prairie clover gets its sign, and it's ready to be taped. One more. is, come here, wild columbine. So this one says to stratify. So we're not going to do stratification like you would do if you were seeding it inside. You would then put it in the freezer for a while in a moist cloth, so it would have the experience of the cold weather. But we're putting them out in the cold weather, so there's no need to do that process. This one likes sun and shade, blooms in June. Hummingbirds love it. It's all fall and early spring is fine. It says cover the seed. Doesn't say it with how much. Germinates in 35 to 45 days at 21 degrees. So this one takes a long time to germinate, and it won't start that process until spring, when the temperature outside gets to 21 degrees. So this one will be coming up a lot later than some of the other ones, which is fine. You just keep an eye on them. And when what looks like the majority of plants have come up, well, that's too many, then you move them out of the shade and into the sun. And that's when you have to begin to watch them for temperature. See that they don't get too hot, because if the sun's beating on them, it is quite possible that they get cooked in these containers. And so when the temperature rises enough that they're, and you can tell they get a little steamy in there, then you have to take the top off. And I found that once the tops were off, they didn't have to go back on. But if you got a cold snap or a frost, you would put the top back on. I've lost the stick. Nope, there it is. And these ones wanted to have the seed covered, but they didn't say with how much. So I'm just going to put, because it's a very small seed, I'm just going to put a little sprinkling over top. I patted the seeds down. I'm not going to pat down the soil that I'm putting on top. Okay. And that is wild columbine. So we're almost done. Now comes the hardest thing I've ever done with this horrible tape that will stick to anything it comes close to. But once you get it on there, it's golden. So to see what this is, wild columbine, because I want to mark the name on the outside. So it doesn't have to be pretty. The tape just has to cover both sides of the cut on the container, all the way around. You can't really pull it against the container because it's kind of floppy. And it's really quite forgiving. It doesn't matter exactly the position that the two cut parts are in, because the tape seals above and below, and that's perfect. If this looks awkward, you'd be happy to know it feels awkward as well. There we go. And I think I said this was wild columbine, so we will write that right now on the outside. So the same thing will happen to the other three, but I won't do that right now. What I learned about the soil and the seeds that's in here is because it has so much moisture, it turns into a cube of ice or a cube of frozen soil. And that's a condition you want to keep it in. So sitting it alongside of a house, on the north side where it didn't get any sun is the best way to do that, because nothing is supposed to happen until the temperature is ambient for it to germinate. And so that is also the reason why we're watering once a month, not because it's dry, but it does dry out in the same way the top of an ice cube would dry out in the freezer if it was there for a long time, or your meat dries out. So what we're doing by putting water in once a month is sealing off the top of the block of soil with water, which turns immediately to ice. And if there's any excess, there's no worry about that, because it'll run to the bottom, and as soon as it begins to thaw, it'll run out. So, what else did I want to tell you? Oh, yes. So when they come up, it's such a joy when you peer in the little hole in the top and the little green things are in there. And they can grow in there until they have a couple of sets of leaves. But then you want to either put them into the garden, and usually you would let them get a little bigger than 2 sets of leaves before you put them in the garden. Or the other thing you can do is transplant them. And one thing that our gang uses is solo cups, and this is a small one. You can buy them in the grocery store. They're usually red or blue. And this is deep enough that the plant can root well. And so you put one plant in there, fill it almost full with dirt, make a hole, plant one plant, and you'll find when you take that plant out in 3 or 4 weeks and put it in the garden, its root has gone right to the bottom. Even though the plant has only gotten an inch or two taller, the root is full, and that's a characteristic of wild plants. They make roots before they make the tops. So these cups are okay, and even taller ones are great. These ordinary nursery plant pots are a little bit short, and you find the roots will curl around, and it'll be fine. You could straighten them out in the garden, but taller plants are better. And then there's these things which I absolutely love, and I picked up some today. They are called root trainers, and it comes in a box with a rack, and there's 8 of these, and there are 4 pots to a page. They go together like that. They fold in half, and then they sit in there. And so you've got 4 8s or 32. You've got 32 plant pots in this container, whereas can you imagine how much space you'd need for 32 of those, the same number of plants? So I've been given plants in these things, and I saved them and I've used them, and I find that I quite like these, although they're a little expensive. This was, for this whole apparatus, was $32 at Lee Valley today in Saskatoon. They're a lot more expensive on Amazon, I found. So there's that. Then my experience with growing last year, I tried, instead of milk jugs, I tried other containers. I tried flats with little square individual plant pots in them, and I tried rotisserie chicken containers and other containers, things that lettuce came in or what have you. None of them worked even close to adequately, and I found that they dried out and the tops of the dirt washed away when I watered some of the little ones. And so I just find that these are the absolute best thing. They keep the moisture in well enough, and you don't put the top back on, you leave it open, that the seeds are where you planted them when they go to germinate. They're not washed down the side of the container or anything like that. So then, how many varieties of plants should you start? Depends on what size of a plot you have. I started quite a few last year because I garden at the place where I live at St. Vladimir Village and Villa, and they let me have a 350-foot area which had a few shrubs and a couple of trees. And so because it was a formal garden before, I wanted to make sure there was enough plants that it looked like something was happening there. So I did grow quite a few plants, but you could start out with 5 or 6 plants and have a good showing. If you get a number of the same kind of plant and plant them together in a grouping, that makes them more visible. Another reason why I like to do starting the plants rather than seeding in the garden is when you seed them in the garden, they come up beside and at the same time as the weeds. And I do know a lot of the common weeds around here, but when I started, I certainly didn't know what these plants were going to look like. And so it would have been quite a lot more difficult for me to sort through that and do the weeding and keep the garden cleaned up enough. So, sources for plants that I would recommend are Blazing Star and Prairie Originals in Selkirk, Manitoba. You can find them on the internet. If you look at the Pollinator Paradise YXE website, you will find recommendations for what types to plant as a beginning garden. You will find other sources of plant seeds and materials. There are a number of people starting up in Saskatoon growing plants, and a lot of the people who have the pollinator gardens in Saskatoon grow their own plants. So it's kind of a network too, that if you wanted to get involved with an organization, that's a lot of fun and you get to experience working on projects together and so on, then look that up on the internet, Pollinator Paradise YXE. And so I guess that's all I can think of to share with you today. If you're going into winter sowing, I wish you the best of luck, and I hope it's as good for you as it was for me. So thank you very much, and good night.